Welcome to the Virginia Civics and Economics Lecture Series. At the end of each slide, there will be a 5-second delay. Use this time to complete your notes. When you are done, push play and move on to the next slide. This presentation will begin in 5 seconds. Welcome to Virginia Civics and Economics Lecture 1.4 on Implementing Consent, and let's talk about that old adage, if at first you don't succeed, try again. Or as Jake the dog likes to say, dude, sucking at something is the first step to being sorta good at something. Don't believe me? Let's ask J.K. Rowling. Her first book was rejected by 12 major publishing companies before it was published. Wonder what book that was? Or this guy, Henry Ford. 5 of his businesses failed and he went broke, lost all his money before starting Ford Motor Company. So sometimes failing is necessary in order to ultimately succeed. And what you're going to learn today is that America failed the first time it tried to form a government. The question we need to ask, though, is what lessons did America learn from its failure that we still rely on today? To answer that question, let's go to the next slide. The United States Constitution represented our success at creating a limited form of government governed through a representative democracy. But before we succeeded, we failed, and we failed big time with the Articles of Confederation. A confederation is a weak or loose organization of states that agree to follow a powerful central government, with states choosing to follow or not follow the lead of the central government pursuant to a governing document. We have a confederation here today in North America. That would be Canada. The provinces of Canada are very strong, but they have all agreed to follow a central federal government. But before Canada tried and succeeded at creating a confederation, we tried as well with the Articles of Confederation, which were adopted in 1781 as the first governing document for the country. In fact, the Articles established the name of the country as the United States of America. Thank you, drafters of the Articles of Confederation in Yorktown, Pennsylvania, for doing... Wait a minute. Why is this scene not famous? Well, it might be in what the drafters actually tried to create when it came to our first form of government. The Articles established a first national government for the country, and some of it looks similar to today. It provided for mutual aid between states, privileges and immunities of citizens, full faith and credit for citizens, and extradition of criminal defendants between the states. In other words, you could go from one state to the other and still be treated as an American. But then it's a lot different. It created a congressional assembly with 1 vote per state, immunity for congressmen, a committee of Congress with limited powers to run the country when Congress was not in session, the power to represent the country internationally, ratifying treaties, setting imports and duties, and appointing ambassadors, promoting a national defense, and declaring war. All of that happened through Congress. It also created a national treasury without the power to collect taxes, but with the power to establish the type of alloy and value of coin struck. This is what our money will look like, but we can't collect any taxes to fund our country. We could create post offices, regulate interstate commerce, that's business between the states, and we could draft letters of credit. It could borrow money. Finally, it further allowed for Congress to settle conflicts between the states, as well as required the states to inviolably observe the Confederation. Everybody needed to get along. Wait a minute. Stuff seems to be missing. Go to the next slide. I already told you the Articles of Confederation are going to fail. The cool thing is understanding why the Articles failed, and that has to do with sticking with your principles or creating something that actually works. The Articles were our first attempt to implement the ideas set forth in the Declaration of Independence, things like protecting unalienable rights and creating a government for and by the people. We just beat these guys. We don't want to be like them. Well, we're about to learn that in order for things to work, our government's going to have to look a little bit like the government of Great Britain. Unfortunately, the drafters of the Articles failed to consider the practical needs of a functioning national government. They put things that have to be in a national government into the state government. All powers not provided to the national government were reserved to the states, including the right to enter into interstate compacts with the consent of Congress, a maintaining of a well-regulated militia and state military defenses, standing armies run by the states, appointment of line officers under colonel in those standing armies run by the states, and state taxation, including voluntary taxation into the national treasury. So not only could the states decide how much money they were going to pay to the federal government, there was no way to settle quarrels between states except with armed conflict. Things like the war between Pennsylvania and Maryland that actually happened. Because of all of this, the Articles created a weak central government with no power to tax or enforce laws, no single person running the country, and no national court system. Unfortunately for the drafters of the Articles of Confederation, there is too much power to the people in this document. Go to the next slide. Not only did the Articles of Confederation fail to create a workable government, they also failed to address many of the issues which caused us to declare our independence in the first place. Things like what this guy, Thomas Jefferson, was addressing in Virginia government after the Revolution. And he did it through the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, which he drafted in 1777, but which would not become the law in the Commonwealth until 1786. The statute set forth that citizens should be allowed to freely follow their own religious beliefs and opinions. In essence, the statute covered both the concepts of freedom of conscience, you should be able to think the way you want to think, and the principle of separation of church and state. The church should be one part of our lives, the government should be another part of our lives, and the two should not come together. This is the forerunner or the template for the First Amendment in the Bill of Rights. Also, the statute set forth that individuals have the freedom of religion without taxation. Prior to the Revolution, you had to pay to pray. And finally, the statute reasserted the natural rights of mankind, including the right to change the laws and nature of preceding governments. Thomas Jefferson's asking, where is the John Locke stuff in the Articles of Confederation? Go to the next slide. We learned a lot from the failures of the Articles of Confederation about the need for a strong national government. But we're the United States of America, and we're not giving up on our principles that easy, so we're going to take another shot at it with the United States Constitution. The drafters of the United States Constitution finally implemented the consent of the people in two ways. The Constitution sets forth the limits of the federal government, and the Bill of Rights and certain amendments to the Constitution set forth the unalienable rights of the people. So it balances our ideals with what we need to actually run a country. And the Constitution goes further. The Constitution also tried to fix the issues found within the Articles of Confederation. It establishes the structures and limitations of a more powerful federal government. It guarantees equality under the law with majority rule, while the rights of the minority were protected. It affirms individual worth and dignity of all people, and it promotes the fundamental freedoms of religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. The drafters of the United States Constitution finally got it right. But the Constitution isn't perfect. In fact, it's been amended 27 times. The Supreme Court is still trying to figure it out, and we're still working on it today as a country. Implementing our consent to be governed is tough, and we can see it happening today in our national dialogue. go to the next slide. So now you know how we the people consented to be governed in this country. You learned about our political philosophy, Locke, Jefferson, and Madison, saying that we delegate our natural rights to the government because the government is in the best position to secure those rights for everybody. You see how we demonstrated our consent through the Declaration of Independence and how we implement our consent through the United States Constitution, which leaves us with one driving question: how does any of this impact me? In other words, who cares? Everybody cares. You see, we live in a unique society, and you need to understand how you fit into that society, not just so that you will do well in America, but so that we will all do well as Americans. And there's a lot to learn. You need to learn the requirements and responsibilities of citizenship. You need to learn the role of the Constitution. You need to learn about your representatives in government, the legislature. You need to learn about the role of the government's leader, the executive. You need to learn about the impact of the rule of law, the courts, the role of Virginia government. We're going to call that federalism, your role in the economy, and how you need to become financially literate. America can be a hard place to live in, but if you are a well-educated, good American citizen, we'll all be better off for it. In the next lecture, we'll start with Unit 1, the requirements and responsibilities of citizenship and the role of the Constitution. Thank you for watching this lecture, and I look forward to seeing you in class.